Welcome to episode 11 of Mattowarrior's Metal Madness, and I am your host, Mattowarrior. And we are not going to do a news segment today because I don't feel like doing that today, but I'm going to talk about some very other interesting things. And why don't I do a news segment? I don't know. I just feel like just getting straight to the point for this one. I didn't do it the last time too, but I'll probably reintroduce that next episode. There just hasn't been enough crazy stuff going on in the metal world the last couple weeks. I don't know. So today, I'm going to be discussing a very controversial but memorable Metal Archives review. And that may sound boring to some of you, but like this guy that did this review is infamous. And for many reasons, and he was a guy that was on Metal Archives or Encyclopedia Metallum for many years. I don't think he's done a review or anything for many years either. I believe he's European of some persuasion, but I decided I'm going to read the whole review in full, and I'm going to go through what I think about it probably after I do the. Well, I don't know if I'm going to do it in the middle because, I know that kind of gets a little tedious reading these reviews, but a little bit of background for this. So this guy's name is Ultra Boris. Ultra and then the name Boris. And he did a bunch of reviews for Metal Archives back in the day. This is probably the most infamous one. And I'm going to give my my feedback on it because I think he does make some good points. I don't agree with the rating he gave this album. I mean, obviously, but I think it's hilarious too that he gave it such a low review score. And I'm just going to go through it and talk about what I think about this because this is a very relevant subject, honestly, especially for what I've been looking into doing in the future, which I won't talk about in this episode, but if I do get more material to do what I'm looking to do, some people know what I'm talking about, but this project that I have, it's not a music project, but it's related to certain things that happened in the musical history. So, what is this review that I'm talking about that he did? It's from March 21st, 2004, and it's a 0% rating for this album, and the title of the review is The Album That Killed Heavy Metal. And what album do you ask this is? Metallica Master of Puppets. So I'm going to read the whole review. I agree with a lot of it. I don't agree with a lot of it. See, from a subjective or objective point of view, it all varies with what we regard as good or what we regard as listenable. And sometimes things that are listenable, I'm not talking about Master of Puppets here, but sometimes things that are listenable, I think they're listenable, but they're, hated, and I like it and nobody else likes it. But I realize from a critical point of view, it sucks or whatever. There's a few albums like that, which people who know my media material from other sources know certain albums that I like that, are widely hated, which maybe I'll do another episode about sometime, not to spoil anything. So I'm going to get down to the brass tacks here. I'm going to read the review, and then I'm going to stop and pause probably after, and then, I'm going to try to read this whole review. It's a long review. It's probably one of the longest reviews on the site, that I've read. So just be prepared. Fasten your seatbelts. So here we go. It takes some damn good reasoning to give this album such a low rating. The 0 implies the absolute nadir of musicality, a level that can only be dreamt of by mere mortals as Fred Durst and your blender. What in Satan's name could this album have done to deserve such a low rating? It pretty much single-handedly ended heavy metal, that's what. Now, on a strictly musical level, I would give the album a 62 or so. It's not bad. It really isn't. It's certainly not as bad as Saint Anger, proud owner of a former record low 3% rating. It's not even as bad as the album that would follow it, Injustice for All. When all is said and done, it pretty much sums up the averageness of the thrash metal or thrash movement perfectly. First off, it is where shit really started to fall apart for Metallica as a band. At this point, you could see the impending death, not just bodily, but creative as well. They are out of Mustaine riffs, and Hetfield isn't exactly the smartest, cleverest cookie in the box, and he's forced to scramble and improvise, so out comes one bashing thrasher, a few assorted riffs here and there, and then all kinds of half-assed and half-baked ideas that pretty much do not belong in heavy metal. The land of the free, the home of the brave. Unfortunately, the world caught on to this album, the expression of vapidity, and decided that this was the way to go. This album is the Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit of heavy metal. It brought heavy metal to its knees and castrated it mightily. It is, by then definition, the most damaging, counterproductive, and overrated LP ever to be released. Even standing up on its own and not letting it poison the minds of those that came after it, I wouldn't even put it in the top 10 most influential thrash releases of 1986. It's easily killed by the unholy trinity of Darkness Descends, Rain and Blood, and Pleasure to Kill, which pushed the envelope of metal in 3 different related directions. It's not anywhere nearly as enjoyable as the expatriate Mustaine's Peace Sells, which is technically brilliant and a whole barrel of fun too, or as dark as Possessed sophomore effort, or Sepultura or Sodom's full-length debuts. It's not nearly as punk as fun as Nuclear Assault's first. Then I could throw in 15, if not 50, other backwash thrash LPs that did nothing for the genre as far as influence goes, but are still a fuckload more enjoyable than this one. So the songs. There is some ownage here. Battery, for example, is fucking heavy and works brilliantly well as a destroyer of worlds. The title track is a bit more calculated with its main riff gronked from one of the Metal Church demos, also Over My Dead Body. But it dies, which is a song, but it dies for a bit in that little Hetfield noodle section in the middle. Say what you will, that part is dumb and a hard bringer of what's to come. Not because it is dumb, but because it is hailed as visionary, not just on the album, but with this band and with metal in general. This album didn't do anything make metal a better, more viable genre. Hell, by 1986, everything that was good about metal was pretty much well established. It was just a matter of time before all the stupid ideas reared their ugly fucking heads and turned the scene into self-parody. From the inane, mindless riff and N-Y, I forgot how to pronounce that word, E-N-N-U-I, I know what it means, of John Schaefer and Iced Earth to the stupid dynamic mismanagement of a million bands, ranging from the misplaced melodicism of the Gothenburg scene to the awful monotony of Opeth. All of these could be traced back to the vast commercial success of this album. Being less than thrash was viewed as a good thing. Less over the top, less expanding the genre, less than creative, less than heavy fucking metal. And of course, it is a human tendency to accept mediocrity because excellence requires actual effort. People jumped right on this fucking album. On this very album. They saw that they did not have to put on an all-out, bonded by blood, thrash fucking mindfuck or the complex harmonic beauty of stuff like Peace Sells with its shredding solos and powerful interludes. If they put in an obligatory slow solo section a la Suck Hetfield, they would be accepted as correct by the metal brethren. Rah, rah, put up the horns, thank you for being bland. 1,000 nevermores were spawned by this album. Oh, shit. Third song, this is probably the parodic equivalent of Black Sabbath here. Because Black Sabbath was mid-paced, creative, and heavy. This is mid-paced, boring, and plotting. There is nothing to this song, and of course, it can be viewed as a fucking staple of the groove thrash movement. Rob Flynn, whose contributions to excess are merely putting extra letters on the end of his first name, probably ejaculated twice as hard when he heard the song and realized he could play shitty and get away with it than in any other time of his life, and that includes his entire career in Violence, the band Violence. This very well may be the song that spawned Machine Head. And of course, when Hetfield, through the wall of saliva incident, corrupted Diamond Daryl into being a groove monkey, spawned Modern Pantera too. Next up, a cheesy ballad, Sanitarium, which contains soft sections for the sake of being soft sections, of having soft sections. Of course, proper use of dynamics has always been completely, totally invented by about 1976. If Sabotage didn't have it, then Sad Wayne certainly did, and anyone claiming to add something new to the genre, or no, new to the idea, was pretty much full of hot air. Maybe Rainbow Stargazer can lay a small claim to things, a small claim to have added something, and Sanitarium adds nothing. That said, it does not even play the standard cards correctly. There are tons of songs that start off soft and build up to a frenzied crescendo, and most of them are far more effective than this. See Hell Stars, Winds of War for a perfect example, or even the previous LPs, Fade to Black, for the one that works decently well. But of course there is Megalomania, and then there is this crap. And that's what this is, unmitigated crap masquerading as thrash, but being plodding, boring, modern bullshit. This song has absolutely no balls whatsoever, and heavy metal is all about balls. It's about riffs, it's about smashing a spike through the brains of the listener, making him, her, it perk up and die hard. It's about the slow, twisting zombie passages of Triumph of Death. It's about the flash and color and violence of Chainsaw Charlie. It's about the constant multi-directional bludgeon of From the Past Comes the Storms. It's certainly not about Hetfield moaning, "Leave me be," like 1,000 other ass rape victims to come. But unfortunately, this is what the world caught on to. This is the illusion that destroyed reality, the feeble cry of patheticness in the night that virally castrated a powerful genre. Because as Possessed and DFA and up-and-coming bands like Death and Nocturnus were constantly playing loud, proud, and heavy and expanding the genre, and 1,000 other bands like Iron Maiden and Halloween were consistently waving the banner of Judas fucking Priest, and all of those bands demonstrated vibrancy in life, here was this virus, this awful plague of self-mocking stupidity that slowly corrupted the whole thing from within. And people wonder what happened to metal. People wonder why years like 1993 came along and why horrendous, backwards bands like Lamb of God and Damageplan are now at the forefront of the scene. People wonder. No, it was inevitable that the mediocrity would rise and destroy everything in its path. And all it took for it was the metal scene to be inundated with this backwash crap, the horrendous assault that seems so soothing, so relaxing. So it's okay if you suck, Junior. So Kurt Cobain before Kurt Cobain himself. Look, this band sucks too, and look at the instant popularity they have. Gresham's Law is a harsh mistress. Oh my God, it's like I'm only halfway through, I think. So yes, maybe I was mistaken. Maybe this is the album that should be lauded as the avant-garde of the metal scene of 1986. Forget Dark Angels, 286 beats per minute of ultimate heaviness, throw away Rain and Blood's chaotic assault on the senses, and certainly avoid thinking about Pleasure to Kill's death metal tendencies. Oh, no. None of those albums did jack shit for the metal genre, because the metal genre is, of course, about technological backwardsism, insipidity, and playing turned up to 4 because only losers like Motorhead play, eat, drink, fuck, sleep, etc. on 11. Save the aggression for the Jaeger sessions, right, Hetfield? The actual music needs to be a complete fucking lullaby. Horror of horrors, though mathematically inevitable, of course. The metal genre ate this bullshit up. Again, look at the top bands in pop metal today. The uninspired Iced Earth, who have not had a good idea since 1994, of course proudly declare that early Metallica is their foremost influence. The god-awful Machine Head, as mentioned before, groove monkeys to the core. The lame Testament, who were, other than their lead guitarist, a few screw turns loose in the creativity department, think their New Order, a thrash classic, my ass, is pretty much a fourth-rate Master of Puppets ripoff, and their latest stuff takes ideas that were more heavily present on this LP and less so on others. Fifth up is Disposable Heroes, 8 minutes of thrash showing that if pressed, the band could still deliver the goods. This, along with Battery, is the highlight of the album. It's competent thrash a la 1984-85, except maybe a little bit overlong. That said, if you think that this has crushing riffage, you have not heard Exodus's Piranha. Again, if the album were like this, then it would be, or if the album were all like this, then it would be an average thrasher, not unlike 1,000 others that came out that year. See Death Angels, the Ultraviolence, for a quick example. Following Disposable Heroes is a clearly Mustaine written, at least in the interesting parts anyway, Leper Messiah. The middle break is so completely killing is my business piece sells that the fact that Hetfield could even barely play, not barely play, Hetfield could even barely begin to claim he and Ulrich wrote the song is promptly ludicrous and more so a flat out fucking lie. I can see Hetfield writing the plotting thing that should not be esque beginning and the end of the song, but the middle section has the mark of Dave. I have no idea how this band managed to sign songwriting credits, but the idea of Ulrich coming up with the songs is laughable. It is this little fucking troll that can personally be shown to be the anti-metal figure. No, not just because of Napster, not because of the Black Album and Bob Rock and 1,000 other crimes against humanity in the 90s. He had a hand on this album too. Hetfield by himself would probably have been happy penning silly odes to bludgeonery, 1,000 batteries, each with a slightly lower voltage than the last, and the band would have died its appropriate death by mediocrity. Kubla Khan, anyone? No one's heard of Kubla Khan, and no one should have ever heard of Metallica after 1984 or so. They just got incredibly lucky that Ulrich got kicked out of Metal Church in 1980 and had nothing to do with the East Coast scene, where Overkill were busy declaring that they didn't just give a fuck. They wanted to play live. They just wanted to play live, and repeatedly they compromised their good business sense to continue doing so. Quite a sad thing as that Overkill shot themselves in the face with their selling of their demo to Azra Records for booze money. But when all is said and done, that attitude is by far more the metal way than anything Metallica could have done. Overkill didn't give a fuck and played Crank to 11, finishing their set with Tyrant and recognizing Joey Ramone and Lemmy Kilmister as the twin gods of excess and everything that is right and fuck yeah about the world. Then there was Megadeth with Mustaine, who instantly, at that very moment the band was founded, or maybe even before then, when Mustaine was sent back to San Francisco on that 4-day bus trip, that is when Megadeth became a better band than Metallica would ever be, because Mustaine was right pissed off, and he would outgun, and outriff the band that had jilted him, because that is the metal way, to be over the top and full of dashing creative energy. Metallica had none of this. Maybe at the beginning, they had whatever they could to steal from Venom and Diamond Head LPs. Unfortunately, Hetfield had probably his heart in the right place, but he was a complete fucking pussy. He felt the need to declare between songs in 1985 that he would not be singing the words "Ooh Baby" and wearing lipstick. Paul Baloff took the battle to the other side, issuing an ultimatum to anyone in the crowd wearing a rat shirt. Bobby Blitz didn't even mention it, letting the songs do the talking. He was leaving the posers behind. Hetfield just stood at the side of the stage and sulked because Ulrich was busy cutting his heart out. Ulrich, who had not a whit of songwriting sense to him, he was kicked out of Metal Church in 80 because his drumming was non-existent at best. He, of course, had the spark of marketing, where he landed himself a deal on a compilation without a band or anything other than flyers of Saxon at the Whiskey. And he knew that the way to make it to the top was not the way of Possessed, because Possessed were too heavy and rough to be anything but a cult band. He knew that the way to the top was to scheme and cover oneself in a heavy dose of bullshit. Then he got lucky because he had a pal named Hetfield that really wanted to kill all record label executives and combine Hetfield's true extravagance with Ulrich's poserism, and what you got was a band that appeared to be rebellious, throwing Cliff Burton's hippie tendencies and Kirk Hammett's irrelevance. And the image was complete. At the beginning, the band did have the metal madness. Ooh, that's interesting. When they wrote silly odes to Weapon, like Hit the Lights, empty of social relevance, but completely heavy fucking metal. Thanks, Hetfield and Tanner. It's not hard to be a metal kid at the beginning. And at the beginning, Hetfield was a metal kid. Then Ulrich slowly but surely turned him into a puppet. The album title can be viewed as a proud declaration of Ulrich's conquest of Hetfield, of Metallica, and eventually of the entire scene. The little troll infused mediocrity and slowly burned the world from the inside out. Hetfield became a raging alcoholic, hanging on to whatever riffs he could remember stealing from Mustaine. Burton's hippie rock, which was fine for what it is, but had no place in metal whatsoever, soon became the overriding creative force in the band, and of course to be recognized because Ulrich knew that if he had approved another Hell Awaits, the scene would bury him fast. And of course it would be ludicrous to imply that he was 1/10,000th the drummer Lombardo was. Oh my God, this is such a long review. So along came Master of Puppets, random hippie crap combined with a few random recycled Mustaine moments, all held together by the glue of Hatfield's average riff constructions, perfectly suitable for an average mediocre fifth-rate garage thrash ensemble. And Ulrich's megalomania, that realizing that the steaming pile of directionless garbage was the universal solution to bringing him fame. Not that it was any good, precisely because it wasn't. Because it was mediocre, any idiot with an axe could be like Hetfield now. And if Ride the Lightning sold a whole fuckload of copies, then Master of Puppets and inertia alone would sell a whole fuckload more, and thus the seed was set. And that, my friends, is why Lars Ulrich is the worst thing ever to happen to heavy fucking metal. After the obligatory Mustaine composition comes the long section of hippie crap that is not only the worst song on the album, but the final stake through the heart of heavy metal. I hear Orion, and I hear Opeth. I hear a heap of shit that is labeled progressive and visionary, but it's really a space filler. A throwback to the 60s and 70s, stuff that Black Sabbath moved quickly away from and used only in small amounts. Progressive rock was dangerous stuff to be used in form only, not in actual substance. Careful with it and get brilliant stuff like the Writ. That was a Black Sabbath song. Too much results in fluff, and Iommi was smart to recognize this, but Cliff Burton was not, and he continued to write songs full of this dreck. Ask Hetfield to throw in a few random metal riffs, and what you got is something claimed as amazing by all the losers that would also claim In Flames as a masterwork of a band. Of course, this anthem to loserhood had no heart whatsoever, no spirit, no emotional content, nothing. Thunderhead, this is not. Stargazer, fuck no. Certainly not anything out of the Diamond Head catalog. Not Am I Evil, To the Devil Is Due, or even Ishmael. Diamond Head got it right. And despite the endless stream of pointers from Lars to their general direction, Metallica did not. But of course, it is easier to derive inspiration from the half-baked. Easy to look at what you did not get it right. Missed that one. He fucked up the writing, and claim that it was the best thing ever simply because you have to make something similar, simply so that when you make something similar, you can pat yourself on the back and be proud. Thus, Dark Tranquillity, be proud. You sound like complete shit and have the intensity of 0.0 Iommi's and are hailed as an excellent modern band because you took the Orion approach to things. So Dark Tranquillity, make sure to send Lars a Christmas card once a year because you owe your entire career to him. So many bands nowadays do. So many bands would have never gotten off the ground if getting off the ground were so not kindly redefined as flopping right over and accomplishing nothing, a la Orion. Then the last song. We're almost done, finally, with this review. Then the last song. Damage Incorporated is the last of Hetfield's contributions to the album. Fast and completely insipid. This is in not any way, shape, or form to be mistaken for the burning of Sodom. This is James Hetfield's dying cry as Lars Ulrich finishes him off. In fact, if you look carefully, you can see the exact frame where his heart rips in two. Desperation breeds stupidity, and here's the final desperate act of a man driven to Jägermeister, not because of the grueling tribulations of the road or having one's equipment stolen, or because he had to send an ex-guitarist back to the West Coast in a box on wheels. It's the final death of a man he thinks is on top of the world, being the front man of the most famous heavy metal band in existence, but slowly, subconsciously realizing he is not at all in control and knowing he's going to have to put on a smiling bullshit face for however many years because he certainly can't quit the band. But the only way to stay is to submit to Lars Ulrich, despite all their public assurances that they are partners in crime. Hetfield is weak and resorts to over-the-top boasting. Most thrash bands would, of course, do something like this, but somehow none of the Overkill catalog comes off nearly this pathetic, this fake, this incorporated. Overkill are rotten to the core in the best sense of the word. Let's see. Okay. I lost my place. I had to scroll down. Metallica is the worst, most corporate. And at the head of the machine is the midget himself, Lars Ulrich. He holds the world in his hands, his band, his music, his scene. Best not listen, kids, if you have any decency, any individuality, any self-respect. This is why I gave the album a 0, because it is the album that will slowly draw you and destroy you too. Let this be your warning. Master of Puppets, I'm pulling your strings. Okay. So that was quite a long-ass review. Okay, I'm gonna put it out there. There's a lot of music critics or just writers in general that I like, even though I disagree with them about a lot of things, Like Lester Baines is one of them, like he gave Black Sabbath bad reviews, at least at first. Of course, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that, they were a third-rate Cream ripoff or whatever he said at first. But I think his writing is so good. And I think his attitude is so funny that I just don't care. I can take it. Like if someone wrote a really detailed 10-page review of my music and it was well written and it had good points, I'd be like, well, I play what I play, but you have some good points, When they attack things for being just for dumb reasons, which some of this review, to be honest, does, then I'm more righteously offended. But let's go. I'm going to go through the review a little bit and just talk about what I think about it. So he makes a lot of references to a lot of bands. Most of them I know. It makes reference to Dark Angel. I think he makes a Sodom and does he say a creator reference? Black Sabbath, Megadeth, all this stuff. So going through the album, he likes Battery. I like Battery as well. I think it's a great album, a great song. I think the intro is awesome. So I think he's saying something about the forced pretension of a lot of more modern bands, especially ones that get a lot of critical acclaim and stuff, and a lot of people like, a lot of nerdy kind of metalheads like. And there's something to be said about that. I think there is I think Metallica, because of their ubiquitousness and their critical success, like New York Times in 1988, I think it was, called them the thinking man's metal band, which is an insult because there's plenty of thinking man's metal bands out there, like Queensryche or Iron Maiden or Fate's Warning at the time, that were just well, it's not Metallica though. And Metallica were so much heavy, they just had this they did have a corporate thing going on, that Lars Ulrich is a master of PR, and he's a master of capitalism, honestly. And that's kind of annoying because over the years, I'm not going to say much about what I think about his drumming. I'm just going to say over the years he's changed quite a bit as far as his style, which is not to my liking at this point, honestly. His drumming style, So I don't like, I think he deserves some of the criticism, especially for what he said during the 90s about metal in general. He just totally downplayed that they were metal, and did a lot of stupid shit with Napster, and just says a lot of dumb stuff like the Death Magnetic thing. Now, does he deserve all that scorn? I think he deserves some of it, yeah. He's kind of he kind of can be a douchebag at times, about stuff. So as far as one of the accusations is that he didn't write songs or whatever. So I think it works like this. I think he definitely helps arrange the songs, say, oh, the riff should go here. You see it with the modern, those modern little documentaries about the making of some of their modern albums. He actually does have say in the arranging and songwriting to some extent. So I think that's very untrue about, I know that they did take, the first album has a little bit more sounding like other bands, and then, people try to, there's a stretch to say Over My Dead Body and Master of Puppets sounded like it has a similar pedal tone riff, sort of, but really it's not even the same key or scale that they're using in that song. And I do like Metal Church. So that's, there's a lot of things that are kind of patently false about this review that should be mentioned like that. That's just not true. Now, they did rip off Saxon on Seek and Destroy. They ripped off Weapon on Hit the Lights, and they ripped off a couple of people. So another thing is Leopard Messiah. So that's always been there's always been a insinuation that Dave Mustaine really wrote a lot of it, and they never gave him credit. And that could be true, or it could be similar to riffs that he wrote. So who knows? But I don't think he ran out of Dave Mustaine riffs. There's only 2 or 3 songs that are given credit on Ride the Lightning. I think that Dave Mustaine definitely had an influence on the way that Hetfield plays, but they're markedly different after a certain amount of time. Very different. The tone is different. The way that they play, it has similarities, but it's different. So I don't agree that he just ripped off Dave Mustaine. He was mediocre and all that shit. So I think this review is entertaining, to say the least. And I think it does bring up some good points. So, I think because Metallica got so big and so influential, quote unquote, people do ignore other bands that, do just as good stuff, if not better at times. I think that's true. The first four Metallica to me in the original Garage days are some of the best metal of all time to me. That's just because I grew up with it, and that is what it is. Now, yeah, of course, Iced Earth is influenced by Metallica. You can pretty much hear it. Calls them pop metal. For an underground band, they were kind of big, but that's a little bit of a stretch. Machine Head, all that stuff. I think Justice for All might have had an influence on groove metal more than Master of Puppets. He says, the thing should not be influence groove metal. No, maybe Justice for All, because a lot of those bands, the groove metal bands, heard that. I think Machine Head talked about that or something. Or you can hear it from that because it's this dry thing with the stuff. But Exhorder, of course, were a big influence on groove metal and other stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of a all around just bashing this record that I think it's entertaining. I think it's fine that it's a very elitist point of view, of course. He's talking about Wasp and he mentions Wasp, Hellhammer, all these bands, and I like all those bands. I like Possessed. I like all these bands he mentions, and it's. I think if Metallica were less, if they never did the Black Album, stuff like things like that, if that whole thing never happened, I don't know if this kind of backlash would have happened. Now that said, let's talk about what they did. It spawned 1,000 Nevermores and stuff like that. So I think there is a tendency to measure into this critically acclaimed, we're so intelligent, we're so musically advanced by doing this and that, and we're not like all the other metal bands out there. We don't talk about Girls or Satan or whatever. And Lars actually said that stuff in the 80s and 90s, or mostly the 80s, because he denied even being metal in the 90s for the most part, except for the early 90s. And there is this pretentiousness with that. So Opeth, and he mentions Opeth and stuff, which I like. I like Opeth as well. I like most of the bands he mentions. There's a certain band I'm not going to mention that he does mention that I'm not going to say. I don't know. I'm not going to try to be a coward or something on this podcast. I'm just going to say there's one band that he does talk about in this review that I don't like. It's the only band that I don't like. I like Hellstar. I like Rainbow. I like most of the bands he mentions. Lamb of God, I'm not, I think they're decent, Damage Plan was kind of I don't really consider them I didn't really consider them metal. They're more new metal, sort of with a little bit of groove metal. I was never huge on that, of course. I like Testament. I like Exodus, Death Angel, Megadeth, obviously. But yeah, I think he makes some good points about how Lars Ulrich is kind of this guy that kind of rose, because of hype and because of his hyperbole, he became famous. And there's a lot of other good musicians that, were great. I like Overkill too, by the way. They were better, not necessarily better, but more musically advanced and less pretentious about, I wouldn't say more musically advanced. They could play. I think Metallica were kind of pushing the limits of their technicality, what they could play, and they tried to play something that was on a higher level, even though other bands could probably play better, but didn't play to their level as much. I think that happened a lot, I think Megadeth, they had some really advanced shit too, but they never did a song like Orion back then. They had a lot of, I love Megadeth, by the way, too. But, it's kind of a dish on Cliff Burton, too. And it's I get it. It's, Metallica are so highly rated that maybe they need to be taken down a notch by some people, sometimes just because of the lack of perspective about that. So I don't think Metallica were ripping off bands as much as some of these videos say. You listen to the examples that are on YouTube, and you're like, well, it's in the same key, but like that part's different. I mean, the Dark Angel and Metallica won. What I forgot the Dark Angel song. That they sort of have that, they did that too. But a lot of bands had similar riffs. I think Kill 'Em All is the one that's the most blatant on a couple of sections. So that doesn't matter to me because I still love Kill 'Em All. Led Zeppelin were far worse with their plagiarism. So yeah, I think that this review is very entertaining. It's definitely metal elitism. It's very good metal, it's very good music journalism in a way. It should have been written for a magazine. Of course, no magazine would ever want to, except for like some of those mid-90s like death metal and black metal zines that are around, like Pit or whatever. Like there was a bunch of them. They would have loved to print this review, and that would have been hilarious. Metallica gets a 0 for Master of Puppets. So yeah, I think they deserve. In some ways, like they're just so like tied in to all this stuff. Like it's not like they deserve it, but it doesn't do a bad thing by. Sometimes things that are so high and mighty can be taken down a notch or two. I don't agree that in the extent that he goes, though, of course, but I think it balances out because he's such a good writer, or he was. I don't think he writes anymore for the site. But yeah, it's like I understand what he's trying to get at too, like with the 90s metal, like with groove metal and post thrash and stuff. Like he calls groove metal half thrash, which like it's like half a thrash riff, which is kind of true. Like he came up with that term, I believe, or he's one of the first people I heard using that half thrash term, which is kind of cool. I think that's pretty cool. I think he has a lot of good ideas, this guy, this Ultra Boris. This is from 2004, so that's where the context with like Machine Head and Ice Earth come in, or Nevermore. So I don't think like I think it does do. I think, okay, so he doesn't like the pretentiousness of Metallica, like how it became like this thing, like where New York Times was talking about him and like everybody was influenced by him. There was so many other thrash bands in 1986 that did albums. He talks about that, which is true. There was a lot of thrash bands that did albums. I would still say that Master of Puppets is one of the top 10 or 20 albums of 1986. I don't like it as much as Ride the Lightning because it is a little ponderous, It does get ponderous, but the irony is I like Justice like one of the best. So I don't know, it's just my age or just when I got into them, but like I really like Justice even more than Master Puppets. It's even more plotting and ponderous, if you want to call it that, repetitious, whatever. Not really repetitious, but just kind of goes on and on. So yeah, I agree with him. The musical trends that happened because of this album did happen in part because of this album. I mean, it made people want to, it made people stand up and say, oh, we'll do this type of thing within metal and stuff like that. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it put like a pretentious, but the main thing I think he's trying to get at is there's this pretentious, like very unmetal thing that came about because of Metallica and Master of Puppets and stuff. And I think I know what he's talking about. It's like you think about when, like, the image of metal, and I sort of like I've talked about this before, even on this podcast. The image of metal used to be like this very outrageous, rebellious, dangerous thing that you stayed away from. You had to. I mean, I was told not to listen to it by various people when I first started listening to it. But Metallica made like the mimosa martini set of people like, oh, that's the metal band I like, So a lot of bands wanted to measure up to that in a certain way. And that's why that happened. So, oh shit. Yeah, the outro music played for a second. I don't know if you could hear that, but this is going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to probably wrap it up in about 10, 15 minutes. But, it made people want to do similar things. It had a lot of copycats, people want to do that. Like, I think Heathen did an album that sounded a lot like Justice, but better production, obviously. But, there was a lot of, bands doing that kind of stuff. And it's like he says, like Opeth or, certain bands that wanted to sound like more, like not in like a super technical way as far as like the playing itself, but the compositions themselves maybe. And that's what Metallica did. Like Megadeth, a lot of Megadeth's way more advanced than Metallica, like in a certain way. Like some of the playing, I mean, definitely the lead playing. Like he disses Kirk Hammett, and Kirk Hammett has his issues as far as like if you compare him to other players in the metal genre. But on the first 4 albums, barring some of the weird vibrato choices and some of the tuning on like Kill 'Em All and stuff, I think he's pretty flawless, honestly. Like maybe Justice is where he started to get like a little, like his style doesn't gel for me as much as far as like the earlier albums. And I love Justice too, but like some of the solos are a little bit like, there was like a solo that's like in the wrong key at one point. I forgot. I think it's Harvest or Freight Heads of Sanity. It's like an E minor solo, and it's like, I don't remember it. Music theory wise, I don't think it fits. Like it just sounds a little weird. I still like it, but some of his choices, he was no Skolnick, he was no Poland, he was nobody like that. But he was getting up there. I mean, he was same with Ulrich. I think it fits the songs, it fits the music. I don't know if they would be offended by me saying that they were no Chris Poland or Gar Samuelson, in Metallica. But Hetfield, I cannot fault him at all. I cannot fault him as a rhythm player, as a riff writer, regardless of this review. I agree with a lot of the review. I think there was a pretentiousness, a certain type of smug pretentiousness that Metallica perpetuated in metal. Absolutely. Because it used to be something, like I said, I kind of cut myself off from this point I was trying to make. It used to be something that was dangerous and scary, and then New York Times and, Rolling Stone and all these people started saying, well, there's this new metal band that's a smart metal band. And like people started to listen, and well, that's a band I like is Metallica. Oh, I don't like metal, but I like Metallica is okay. People started to say that kind of stuff, and it was like, oh, these guys are just some guys from the street, and like, they're not dangerous. They don't no spikes, no makeup, no Satan, no groupies surrounding them or anything. Of course that's not true, but like it was kind of this thing, and it kind of paved the way for like this '90s like attitude about stuff, like within metal and out of metal too. It kind of did. So even in like European metal, like he mentions, like Opeth or In Flames, both bands which I like, at least with In Flames or earlier material. And yeah, he makes some good points about that. And he does it in a way that's very creative and very funny, even if I think it's pretty brash and abrasive and cynical and kind of fucked up overall. But I still think this review is a masterpiece. I'm going to say, as far as his rating, he said 66, right, on Metal Archive's rating. I'd give it like a 90, like 80, maybe 85 on that scale out of 100. I wouldn't give it 66. I would give it higher than that. I would give like Ride the Lightning probably 90 and 95, though. I would say, I don't know if maybe 100 actually. I would probably give Ride the Lightning 100. I'd give Kill 'Em All probably up there too. I'd probably give Justice up there as well. Master of Puppets is my least favorite of the first 4. It has been for a long time. I don't know what it is about it. It's just a little, I don't know. It could get going a little bit more. He's telling the truth about some of that, but then again, like I said, I'm kind of a hypocrite because I love Justice. So I think overall, this guy gave a good lashing to Metallica, and honestly, like it's not something that you can say is like necessarily unjustified considering all these things that happen. I mean, I would never bash Metallica like that in that way myself, but I think there's justification to talk about this album that way in a certain way and from a certain point of view. I mean, it's when Metallica paved the way for like the nerd, and I speak for myself too because I'm part of this contingent, regardless of whether or not I like it. But this nerdy metalhead kind of archetype, like, oh, they like Metallica and they like Rush, but they don't like that scary like growl stuff, or something like, or satanic stuff. Like, it's like this nerdy thing. Well, I mean, obviously that's different now, but like I'm talking about like at the time, like late '80s, early '90s, that was kind of the like a growing subset of metal fan that he's kind of getting at. Whereas the stereotype / reality, I mean, like the new Stranger Things, there were metal nerds, even in the '80s, but like they played D&D and stuff. But like this kind of thing with Metallica, like they kind of solidified this, like, and because the media perception is that that they were the thinking man's metal band. Never mind The Warning by Queensryche. Never mind Fate's Warning. Never mind Watchtower. Never mind fucking Voivod. Never mind all these bands that did all these classic albums, even fucking King Diamond. I mean, all these classic concept albums and all this stuff, all this complicated technical neoclassical kind of shit in the 80s. Metallica are the thinking man's metal band out of all that. And that's because of marketing, honestly. Like, that is part of it. And I'm not saying that Master of Puppets is musically worse than The Warning at all. I think it's great, technically excellent. I think that the playing itself is maybe about like 75% to progressive metal that was already around by then, by the way, but it's not progressive metal because it can't have that kind of finesse at that level. And like I said, Megadeth does get more complicated, but they're more succinct with their compositions. They have more parts in a shorter amount of time. Metallica has a lot of maybe a certain amount of parts in a longer amount of time. That's kind of one of the differences. But still, what's better? I like both of them, like I've said. But yeah, I think Ultra Boris kind of hit the nail on the head in a certain way, but I don't agree with the rating, and I like Metallica a lot more than he does, obviously. But do they deserve the scorn after the Black Album, after Napster, after people, Lars Ulrich denying heavy metal? By 2004, did they deserve that? Saint Anger, which I won't go into my personal opinions on it right in this episode. Did they deserve, like, and even more douchery, like in the future from 2004, 4 years later, Death Magnetics production and non-existent dynamics? I mean, did Metallica deserve the scorn for some of this stuff? Absolutely. They deserve to be, they're so big and so like, it's like too big to fail metal band. They're such a corporation at this point. So yeah, I'm sorry, but they do deserve questioning in the way that he did, because while I wouldn't write it myself, while I disagree with much of it, I think it's important to kind of get some perspective in there. So yeah, the image of a metalhead in the 80s was like this juvenile delinquent, maybe even in foster care, did drugs, had, precocious sex, did all this crazy shit, got into trouble, vandalism or violence or whatever, and spray painted stuff, drove a Camaro, and later like worked a factory and like had a Camaro on their lawn. But Metallica came around and like the snootier set started like saying, "Oh, that this is the one metal band I like," and then that's what happened. And that's because of albums like Master of Puppets. So he's spot on by taking him down a notch pedestal, from that pedestal. He's right in doing that in a certain way, because that kind of thing, the pendulum, I think, swung a little too far in recent years, Because in my opinion, I just like a little danger in music or in culture, because when everybody's saying the same thing, you go to Blabbermouth. I'll just give you an example. You go to Blabbermouth, and people are saying the same thing about the same topical thing. All the bands, everybody. Whether it be like, or it's like that one guy that says the opposite thing, from the political point of view, and then he's shunned and an outcast, or vice versa, or whatever. There's no like free thinking from either side, quote unquote, about anything a lot of the time. And these guys, it's became this like more middle class, and I'm not saying like I'm not a communist or Marxist or anything, but bourgeois kind of thing to like, Metallica kind of pushed that into that contingent, pushed metal into that contingent in a certain way. Or call it petty bourgeois or whatever, I'm using some terms that are probably a little bit controversial. That's upper middle class or whatever. So then, you had people that, that were pretty good students that started to like Metallica, but they were good students, and they, maybe they smoked a little pot on the weekends or something once in a while, and they tried to stay away from that stuff. And they were like music theater kids or something. I don't know. They weren't and then jocks listened to them too, just to like get revved up. And then they listened to Pantera, and then Metallica, was less. And then Megadeth did their album that was like the Black Album called Countdown to Extinction. And it was just a mess. And in a way, as far as like the contingent, I normally liked heavy metal. I wasn't like in high school back then in the 80s. So I don't know, maybe a lot of jocks liked metal. A lot of regular people probably liked metal, but a metalhead was pretty much like an outcast at that time. And that's what probably Ultra Boris is like saying, is that this Metallica thing kind of became too big for its britches and like kind of destroyed the mystique of heavy metal amongst people in a certain way, and kind of destroyed like that rebelliousness in a certain way, because it's very establishment. It's very established. Maybe it's not establishment now, but back then it's like saying, like, you wanted to legitimatize heavy metal. Like, oh, it's like, and even when I was growing up, like, but they're so influenced by classical music, mom, or my sister, or your dad, or your grandfather, or grandmother. But listen to this Mozart part, this thrash song, or "Lick My Love Pump," by Spinal Tap. It's influenced by Bach and Mozart, or whatever. It's Mach, Mach. Or whatever, the pretentiousness. You're trying to like legitimatize things. When Ultra Boris is just like, just do your own thing. Try to, and Lars Ulrich is a big part of that, of course. Like, he calls him a little troll. He's like a little lawn gnome to me, but or that little pug meme that was happening for a while. It was pretty funny. But yeah, I kind of, I get his point. I get what he's trying to say. I agree and I disagree at the same time. I'm just like, well, I like a lot of pretentious metal bands, I used to play a Dream Theater song in a fucking band. I'm not huge on them lately, but like I get both sides. I listen to the first the first Bathory. I've listened to quite a bit. But then I used to play a Dream Theater song. I get both sides of the metal thing. The pretentious side that none of the people that go to Prague Power ever do drugs. They, or they drink a little bit, or something like Prague Power USA at the festival. But then, I knew this person said, I don't like metal. I like prog metal. Like, it's just like, okay, all right. So you like a certain subgenre of rock, and you think that by saying this, I will be impressed, or I will think that you're a better person because you're, it's like a political like affiliation or something. Like, fucking get over yourself. So, and I think Metallica's, influenced the zeitgeist to go towards that. Now, as far as like their influence on the bad styles of metal and rock that came in the 90s, I think there were enough bands and enough situations maybe not by 86, but by 88, that they didn't need to do that work. They didn't. I don't think that they're responsible for some of the bad like groove metal trends, which led to new metal. Let's just face it, or the grunge and post grunge stuff, which I like. I like all these styles, by the way, except for new metal, to some extent. So I don't think they're responsible for that. I don't think they're responsible for Pantera going groove metal or Machine Head because a thing that should not be. That's something I don't agree with. But obviously their riffing style did have an influence on a lot of that stuff too. I mean, Disturbed once said, "Oh, Metallica and Pantera." It's like, and they don't really sound like them, but they said they were influenced by them. But it's like, I understand where they're coming from. When you have Metallica like singing with Lady Gaga and Miley Cyrus, I mean, just like or having them sing with them and stuff. It's like, would Iron Maiden do that? Would fucking Exodus do that? It's like, what the fuck? So a lot of it's a little bit of jealousy. It's like Ultra Boars is definitely not, some famous metal musician writing an article that I know of. It could be, you never know. But I think I saw a picture of him once. Supposedly, allegedly. I don't think he was in a band, but he may have been though. But like, it's not. It's jealousy. Like, oh, Metallica are so big, all these other bands aren't, and that's is what it is with that. But it is a little bit jealousy because they're so big. I don't know how they got so big. I think it's marketing, a lot of it. I think there is quality though. It's not like it's just shit. I mean, I don't agree with the mediocrity part. I think there are certain parts of Metallica's musicianship that are a little bit lopsided. I'll put it that way. Like, Kirk Hammett is no Skolnick or Chris Poland, and Lars Ulrich does not play as technical as Hoagland or Lombardo or, let's see who else, Charlie Benante, from Anthrax. I mean, he's not at that level, but I think in the 80s at least, he could hold his own. I think with Justice for All, I think if he would have kept going, I think if they would have kept going with that sound and that attitude of Justice for All, and kept trying to push the technical up the technical ante on subsequent albums, I think people would not be bashing Lars like they do now. I think if Kirk Hammett kept his style but like advanced it somewhat like from the 80s, I don't think people would be bashing on him either. He has an idiosyncratic style of playing that fits Metallica, but it's certainly not like as advanced as Chris Poland. Now, composition-wise, Cliff Burton was the music theory guy in the band, and he was definitely one of the best members of the band, along with James Hetfield. It's the truth. He was somewhat of a virtuoso on bass, obviously. So you have two really good musicians with two kind of average musicians playing this, kind of a little bit technical type of stuff, somewhat technical. Long-winded passages, which Ultra Boris talks about with these other bands, which he's completely straight on about. Because obviously Metallica's song length influenced some of these bands, but there are other bands doing that stuff too. I mean, it's not like Metallica were the only one doing like 8-minute songs by then in thrash or in metal, So it's kind of a little bit, it's a little bit of a misfire there. But I think also, like, them talking about their influences in interviews, like Cliff Burton probably talk about Rush, and James Hetfield, they all talk about all these newer British heavy metal bands and stuff. I mean, I think they helped more than hurt metal, at least in the 80s. That's just my opinion. And maybe some of the trends that they helped start went to shit, but you can't blame Soundgarden for Nickelback, you can't blame Mr. Bungle or Faith No More for Limp Bizkit. I mean, you can, but it's like, it's still very far removed from that. So, but I will always love Metallica. That was one of the first bands I got into. I have a back patch of Creeping Death on my jacket, on my battle jacket, whatever. I'll always love them. I think they've done a lot of stupid, misguided shit since Justice. There's just been a lot of dumb stuff they've done. And I do think that they are a little too highly rated. Maybe I'll call them overrated to some extent, but they were still one of my favorite bands as far as those first 4 albums and Garage Days go. Period. I still listen to Ride the Lightning a lot, and I listen to the other ones quite a bit too. And it's just like that is what it is, and I like a lot of the stuff that Ultra Boris mentions, and I'd add some other bands to the mix too, like I said, Voivod, like their stuff, or a lot of these bands that did equally technical kind of stuff, sometimes equally long-winded kind of stuff. Fates Warning had super long songs too. Don't forget. By 1986, I believe one of them was like 10 minutes long on Awaken the Guardian. I think the last song was. Prelude to Ruin, I think, was pretty long. They had a lot. There was some bands doing that kind of stuff. It wasn't like Metallica were the only one doing 8-minute songs, and that sucks because Opeth picked it up from that. No, it's not like that. So overall, I love good writing. I love snarky cynicism sometimes and sarcasm, like Ultra Boris, or whatever his real name is, does in this review. So I'd recommend reading it just for a laugh and for, to kind of put things into context. I think it's good to have this kind of like this purging of Metallica sort of in the metal scene. Like, not purging, it's almost like this cleansing ourselves of this thing called Metallica once in a while, because it's like it kind of gets a little complicated with things. I don't think about Metallica that much. I just listen to Ride the Lightning on the treadmill and stuff sometimes. I do listen to the other albums too sometimes too, like Kill 'Em All. I'm just saying, like, I don't really think about it that much. It's like, it is what it is. I listen to music that I like, I don't care about like this context anymore of Metallica in the metal scene. It's way too late for all that. I mean, it is what it is. I cringe at certain things they do now, or certain music they do sometimes, or just moves they make, or things they say. It's just stupid, but it is what it is. You guys got to keep it in perspective. There's so many bands, so many albums, and so much time, so little time on this planet. So, I mean, but, yeah, I do like this review. I'd give it a read. Lester Baines, or who else do I like? That J.D. Considine or whatever. There's a bunch of writers or Robert Palmer, the writer for Rolling Stone back in the day, was pretty good too. There's a lot of good music writers. Trouser Press, that was a good one too. There was this magazine called Trouser Press that did really good music journalism. The reviews were very well written, even if I disagree with them. There's a lot of stuff I disagree with these guys about. I don't really agree with Lester Baines about every band he talks about, but he has such a style of writing. And this Ultra Boris had some potential for sure. He definitely did, or does, or did. So I'm just going to wrap it up now, and I think it was cool to revisit this review, and I will do more episodes like this in the future where I go over something like this, or one subject. I'll probably bring back the news next time. I just got kind of burnt out by reading all this blabbermouth stuff over and over again. But I will see you later.